Number 8. Al-Quwain Mystery Plane. During the 1990s and early 2000s, the city of Al-Quwain in the United Arab Emirates, UAE, was home to a bustling, unofficial airfield known as the UAQ Aerodrome. One morning in 1999, a Soviet-era Ilyushin IL-76 cargo plane appeared on the ground out of nowhere. No one seemed to know where the 153-foot-long plane had come from, and it remained firmly parked in place even after the airfield closed in 2009. Records showed that after the Soviet Union collapsed, the Russian Air Force continued to use the aircraft until 1997. It subsequently changed hands between a few obscure airlines, including Air Ses and Centrafrican Airlines. Both had ties to a notorious Russian arms dealer named Viktor Bout, who was banned from entering the UAE in the early 2000s. He's currently serving a 25-year sentence at a federal prison in the U.S. for conspiracy to kill American citizens and officials and aiding a terrorist organization. But the exact story behind how one of his shady airline's planes ended up parked at a small airfield in the Middle East remains a mystery. One theory suggests that the pilots somehow mistook the property for a bigger airport. Others have wondered if someone bought the plane with plans to turn it into a restaurant. A third theory proposes that the pilots were denied entry into the UAE but ran out of fuel and had no choice but to make an emergency landing. The rusting eyesore was finally dismantled in 2022. A guard who was keeping watch over the demolition refused to give details to reporters beyond confirming that the aircraft was being destroyed. Unfortunately, there's a good chance that the circumstances leading up to the plane's arrival at Al-Quwain will remain forever shrouded in mystery. Number 7. MS Cabo Santa Maria. Located west of Africa's mainland in the central Atlantic Ocean, Cape Verde is an archipelago consisting of 10 volcanic islands. It was colonized during the 15th century by Portuguese explorers and quickly became an important commercial center and stopping point along major shipping routes. Cape Verde achieved its independence from Portugal in 1975 and has since become one of Africa's most developed and democratic countries. Along the northern shore of the desert-covered island of Boa Vista, there's an old, rusting cargo ship known as the MS Cabo Santa Maria. It's been sitting in the shallow waters off the Praia de Atlanta beach since 1968, when it ran aground while en route to Brazil and Argentina with a variety of goods and gifts aboard. A tugboat was sent to try freeing the Spanish vessel, but it remained stubbornly stuck in place. Luckily, all of the crew members escaped without injury. Local residents of Boa Vista and neighboring islands worked together to remove the cargo from the doomed ship. For nearly a year, they painstakingly salvaged what they could, using mules and donkeys to ferry the goods to the nearby city of Salrey. After spending more than half a century exposed to the salty ocean winds and beating waves, the Cabo Santa Maria is little more than a decaying hulk of metal that's been reduced to a portion of its former size. Much of its deck and holds have vanished, and it's only a matter of time before the rest of the ship loses its battle against the elements and disappears. Number 6. Random Floating Tank. In late 2021, oil rig workers spotted what appeared to be an old, rusting tank drifting in the Natuna Sea near Indonesia's Riau Islands. Images of the mysterious vehicle went viral as authorities tried to intercept the floating object. Their first few tries were unsuccessful, giving social media users around the world an opportunity to speculate and come up with their own theories and conclusions about how the military vehicle ended up in the water. Observant commenters were quick to point out that the tank's features resembled both the US-made M1 Abrams battle tank and a Chinese Type 15 light tank. It looked like it hadn't been driven in years, yet also bore some surprisingly modern characteristics. After drifting aimlessly for over a week, the tank floated into shallower and calmer waters, and the Indonesian Navy managed to pull it ashore. They discovered that it wasn't an actual vehicle, but a skillfully crafted replica. It was hollow on the inside, which explained how it was capable of floating. Left with more questions than answers, officials announced that an investigation was underway, but the strange object's origins remain a mystery for now. How do you think the tank got in the water? Tell us in the comments below and hit that subscribe button while you're at it. Number 5. The North Alabama. As Nebraska and South Dakota grappled with a brutal drought during the summer of 2022, the portion of the Missouri River that runs through the states saw its lowest water levels in years, exposing a long-forgotten 19th century steamboat wreck. Known as the North Alabama, the 220-ton wooden vessel hit a snag and sprang a leak in 1870 near Goat Island, which sits along the border between the two states. It was traveling from Sioux City, Iowa to Yellowstone County, Montana with flour, whiskey, and other supplies from miners in the Rocky Mountains when the disaster happened. Around $12,000 worth of cargo went down with the ship, and the captain died in the tragedy, but the fate of everyone else aboard remains a mystery. The North Alabama disappeared underwater until 1904 and has reappeared a handful of times since then when the river was low. It's one of many vehicles and other objects that have become visible in recent years as extreme droughts plague the United States and parts of Europe. Number 4. Romania's abandoned planes. The southwestern Romanian city of Craiova is home to an abandoned airbase that functions more like a junkyard. It's filled with decaying Soviet-built MiG-15 fighter jets, MiG-23 fighter jets, and at least one Romanian-built IAR-93 Vulture reconnaissance aircraft. Details and photos of the site are hard to come by, minus a handful of snapshots that the U.S. government released after an airfield survey team visited the property in 1996. They traveled there at the request of Romanian officials who wanted to know if the base met U.S. and NATO standards for use in operations and training exercises. It's clear based on the pictures that the former airbase's parking ramp had been reduced to little more than a storage space for obsolete aircraft that were unlikely to ever fly again, much less be used for any practical use. The outcome of the meeting is unclear, but if the base had been put back to use, there would likely be more information available about it. So it's probably safe to assume that the site remains disused and largely forgotten about. Number 3. Zeljava Air Base. From 1968 to 1992, a top-secret underground airport operated along the border between the modern-day countries of Croatia and Bosnia and Herzegovina. Known as Zeljava Air Base, it was built into a mountain and was once Yugoslavia's largest airport and military base, and among the biggest facilities of its kind throughout Europe. The property saw some of its heaviest use in 1991 during the Yugoslav Wars. When the Yugoslav People's Army withdrew, they blew up the runway and parts of the tunnels to prevent Croatian and Bosnia-Herzegovinian forces from utilizing the base. Tons of explosives were used, shaking the city of nearby Bihać. Some residents even claimed that they could see smoke rising from the site for 6 months after the destruction occurred. While some local law enforcement agencies continue to use the former base for training purposes, the property is still littered with landmines and it's considered unsafe for visitors. People still go there at the risk of getting hurt or being kicked out by police in hopes of catching at least a quick glimpse of the disused base. The last plane to touch down at the site in 1992, a Douglas C-47 Dakota, remains there today, covered in graffiti and nestled among the overgrowth that has reclaimed the area. The aircraft sits at the former entrance to the complex, which is marked by the crumbling remnants of what was once an airstrip. There are also 2 Republic F-84 Thunderjet fighters, which were originally manufactured for the U.S. Army right after World War II. Locals have proposed turning the property into a municipal airport, but these plans have failed to move forward. Number 2. Po River World War II wrecks. Italy is one of several European countries that have struggled with concerningly low water levels in recent years due to extreme drought. In 2022, the country's largest river dropped so low that a World War II-era barge that normally sits below the water's surface became visible. Known as the Zibello, the 164-foot-long boat was used for transporting supplies before it sank off the town of Galtieri in 1943. It traveled along the 405-mile-long Po River, which runs from the Alps to the Adriatic Sea. While the barge's hull had appeared a handful of times over the years, 2022 marked the first time that nearly the entire vessel could be seen. Its reappearance came amid numerous other discoveries along the perilously low river, including a German military half-track vehicle that became visible in northern Italy near the city of Mantua. Just days or weeks before Germany surrendered to the Allies in May of 1945, the Nazis pushed the machine into the river to prevent it from falling into American hands before retreating from the region. A British reconnaissance plane spotted the vehicle around the time it was dumped, but it soon disappeared and remained out of sight until the record-breaking drought hit. The half-track was identified as the SD-KFZ-11 model, which saw widespread use throughout the war. At first glance, it looks like a heavy-duty truck, but these 7.7-ton beasts were capable of much more than your typical four-wheel drive. Each machine could carry up to 8 troops and function primarily as an armored personnel carrier as well as a medium gun transporter. Around 9,000 of the vehicles were produced between 1938 and 1945, making the SD-KFZ-11 one of the most commonly used German tactical vehicles during the conflict. The vehicle, found along the Po River, is one of several that the Nazis abandoned towards the end of the war. But the recently discovered half-track had been missing for decades before it was rediscovered, and experts had been searching for it to no avail. It was pulled from the mud and will go on display at the Second World War Museum in Felonica. Number 1. North Korea's rotting tanks. There are an estimated 26 million people living in North Korea, around 13 million less than in the state of California. Yet the Hermit Kingdom boasts the world's 4th largest standing military, with an estimated 1.2 million active troops at any given time. And while the hereditary dictatorship's scarce resources could be put to much better use, the Kim family has made it a long-standing tradition to put military might before the well-being of its poor and undernourished civilian population. Knowledge of the repressive regime's technological capabilities is somewhat limited, but experts estimate that there are thousands of tanks in service under the Korean People's Army, and most, if not all of them, are thought to be extremely outdated. During the 1970s, the country received over 1,000 Soviet and Chinese tanks, many of which are likely still in service today. Researchers believe that these vintage vehicles may not be in great working order and may be suffering from neglect. The North Koreans have also built their own array of secretive vehicles that most of the world admittedly knows very little about. The most formidable tank to roll off the production line is the diesel-powered Chonma-ho. Measuring nearly 22 feet long, 11.5 feet wide, and 7.9 feet tall, these 40-ton machines can carry up to 4 crew members and have a maximum speed of 31 miles per hour. In keeping with the Kim family's Juche philosophy of self-reliance, the Chonma-ho was designed to fulfill a technology gap that came with the loss of Soviet and Chinese support. And while there's evidence that the tank's engines and other components were bought from other countries rather than produced domestically, the vehicle seems to be serving its purpose for the time being. It would probably be a different story if North Korea actually came to blows with the US or South Korea, whose militaries are equipped with vastly superior machines. North Korea's ability to continue developing tanks on an effective or meaningful level is highly questionable. With a huge amount of the cash-strapped dictatorship's money being poured into nuclear weapons development, there probably isn't much funding left over for other projects. The current fleet of aging tanks is already considered obsolete in most developed countries, and the vehicles will eventually give way to old age and become inoperable. While it's unclear what happens to decommissioned military equipment in North Korea, a handful of countries have bought and actually used Chonma-ho tanks. Ethiopia acquired an undisclosed number of them during the early 1980s, while Iran received 150 of them. This rare photo, captured in 1991, shows a destroyed Chonma-ho in the Ethiopian capital of Addis Ababa following a battle between government and rebel forces. It was likely one of the few Chonma-hos to ever see combat. Thanks for watching. Which of these mysterious vehicles shocked you the most? Let us know in the comments down below, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time for another amazing video right here on American Eye.